Well, hello and welcome along to another We Happy Few 506 podcast with myself and the beautiful Doug Allen. How you doing, Dougie?
I'm very well, thank you, Matt. How you doing?
Good. This is the second time we've done this. We're making it sound very natural. I'm going to introduce our guest now, and then I'm going to backtrack slightly. There's something I wanted to plug. We have another of the great masters of the aircast, Riley Neldam. How you doing, Riley?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, yeah. You're a bit too good looking for this screen. This isn't going on YouTube, is it?
I think we're going to find that with all the cast from Masters
Yeah,
of the Air. If the one thing you
isn't it?
Just
guys
have
have in
very good
common,
natural lighting.
Yeah,
all
yeah.
right, yeah,
Yeah, it's bad, isn't it? Getting these young lads, these good looking young lads on, isn't it?
yeah, we were never that good looking. I remember. I think when I saw us when we all got together for the first time, we all looked a bit rough. But I think the Masters of the Air cast, you were all incredibly handsome young men, and it does look like a kind of a movie cast rather than a you know
Yeah, rattle bag of fugly English
yeah,
guys. Yeah, that's
exactly, yeah.
exactly what that is.
Who
Yeah,
knew the bombers were all so handsome and Instagram ready?
Yeah, that's right.
exactly. That's exactly what that is. Yeah, led by Austin Butler staring into the sunlight with a toothpick in his mouth. It's just
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
oof, oof.
How can
Can't
you
Something for
get
compete
much
with
better
that?
than that.
you can't. Something for ladies. There's something I just want to plug before we crack on. And that is one of the Band of Brothers guys, our own friend Alex Sabga. Sabga, how do you pronounce his second name?
Sapka.
Sabga. All right. He's doing the jump into Normandy, or he's leading the jump into Normandy. There's a bunch of the guys that are currently, I believe, in Toccoa training to do the jump out of a C-47 in Normandy next year. He reached out to me but he's been very English about it. So he reached out, can you give me a bit of a plug? And I was like, yeah, yeah, sure. But he's not giving me the name of the project or anything. So
Yeah,
watch out for that.
it's called Currahee to Normandy, the
Right.
jump.
Yep.
I've got it here. If anyone's like kind of watching, if you see that logo, so they just arrived today, and some of them arrived yesterday in Toccoa, and
Fantastic.
they're raising money for vets, and they're going to do a jump over Normandy on the well, weather permitting, on the 6th of June. So
And is there like links and stuff that people can go to and donate? Because I think they're looking for sponsorship on the Normandy
yeah,
end.
I think I mean Alex hasn't told me too much either in terms of I'm pretty sure they've got a Patreon page. What we'll do is that I'll check that out and maybe we'll plug that at the end.
Okay, mate. Nice
I'll check
one.
that out now. Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay, and I'll get on and interview our illustrious guest. Both me and Doug are dyslexic. Doug a little bit more than me, but I don't know. Whenever we have to read out the Patreon names, neither of us can get them right. Uh,
Does that balance out somehow if you're
no,
both
it's just
dyslexic?
no, it doesn't. It's like two negatives making a double negative, actually. Um, so, could you introduce the man that you played in Masters of the Air, please? Because I don't want to mispronounce his name.
Sure. I played in Masters of the Air. Technical Sergeant Michael V. Boccuzzi is well, that's my poor Italian pronunciation, but most of the other guys refer to me as Boccuzzi. That's the more American way of pronouncing it, but Boccuzzi is the original Italian pronunciation.
Did he cling to that pronunciation?
No, I don't believe so. He grew up in Stamford, Connecticut. So growing up there, I mean, it's definitely part of the country where you've got a strong contingent of Italian Americans, and I'm sure around his family, of course, they would pronounce it correctly. But the all the guys from other parts of the country would have just had to simplify it because it's a tough one to pronounce if you're not Italian.
I only asked that question. We usually have Matt Mabe from the 100th Bomb Group on here on our podcast when we get you guys on because he's a great reference with the guys, the real guys. You know, he's curating their history. And he sent me a link. So I did a bit of sort of due diligence about Mr. Boccuzzi, and he was described as having a bit of the devil about him. So I was wondering if you didn't pronounce his name right, you might get belted. That's why I asked.
He was from all counts quite the wild card. He brought the heat from what I've read about him, and I actually was very fortunate. It was a a real dream I had, a hope that somehow I'd be able to get in contact with any of his family.
Uh-huh.
And I struggled. I read a book about I think it's called An American Town Goes to War. It's about all the different young men from Stamford, Connecticut that enlisted. And so, of course, Michael has a little chapter dedicated to him and his service. And I was hoping to get in touch with the author and maybe finding if there were any family members I could still get in touch with. And I was unsuccessful, but luckily, because of it being 2024, around the time that Masters of the Air was premiering, Michael's family reached out to me online. I got a few emails, and right before the episode premiered, when Rosie's crew enters the show. So he's got a few children that still live in Connecticut, and I've exchanged a few messages with them, and it was a very surreal experience that I feel very lucky to have had. And they told me a bit about him and how proud they all were, um, that their father's story is being told. And it was quite overwhelming for me, um, to because he passed away quite a while ago. And so to have a living link to him was really something.
Wow. Yeah, that's, I think you may be, of the guys we've interviewed a few, the only one who has that particular story, who's had contact with the family.
Yeah, I know a few of the other guys, when filming, had said they had managed to make contact. Ralph Law, who plays Ken Lemons, before filming, he was able to get in touch with the extended family of Ken Lemons, and they sent him lots of well wishes and positive support. And I know the same for Nate Mann, who played Rosenthal, got in touch with Rosie's son. So it's different case by case because as is typical of the story, it's one of the things that gets touched upon in the beginning of Band of Brothers as well, that these guys really come from every corner of the country and they're from different walks of life, and they all are brought together with this common mission. And so it's a challenge to track all these people down.
Yeah, and I guess it's very different from the sort of experience that we had, because you can't really base your sort of character, if you like, or your interpretation of the guy on the sons say so. Do you know what I mean? Because they're
Yeah,
obviously going to see their father in a completely different light, and also they've only
yeah,
known their father from, I don't say, when you can remember, say when they were 40 or something. So it
yeah.
is very different. I mean, it's great to have that sort of affirmation. It's great to have that link. It's great to have that sort of emotional connection. But in a sense, it doesn't really help.
Yeah, I know what you mean. In a way, I think it was probably for the best that I wasn't able to make contact until after the thing was long
Mm-hmm.
finished, because unfortunately there wasn't any reference other than a few photos and there were some somewhat revealing articles actually that I found, really old articles from military journals. There was a military newspaper for servicemen in the time, and me and some of the guys dug up some of these old articles, and one of them, I can't remember I'll have to paraphrase somewhat, but in the officers club, he was known to, drink a bit and be pretty hot-headed. So there was a few incidents where I think, fights broke out. He punched a an officer in one case and spent a night in the brig. All the kinds of stuff that you hear about in movies and you think, oh, it's just Hollywood. This is just they're just trying to make these guys, these Hollywood action heroes. But it's right there in black and white. You've got these articles written about the exploits and the stories of these guys. It really put a smile on my face because in the script he's written to be a little bit hot-headed,
Uh-huh.
but there is confirmation that he did have that quick fuse, and so he was one of the guys that. One of the things that we talked about is, and this really came across in the script, that there's a lot of griping and grumbling in for these guys because of the things they're asked to do. They get orders, and sometimes they're very tough orders. But he was one of the guys that could be counted on to always speak his mind and was the voice for a was the voice, the collective voice of all the gripes, I guess, or the voice of all the collective gripes. Because if something was BS, he wouldn't be shy to say it, and often got himself in trouble because of that. So I that little detail was great, because not having a lot to go off of, you just have to. Well, I found that I had to take these little bits that I could find and start from there. But as you say, it's you can't really go off of somebody's memories, because
No.
they can have a very different perspective. And so it was a unique challenge, but I found the whole process, and the production's commitment to authenticity. I mean, clearly it was no different in Band of Brothers. The commitment to authenticity just floored us every day. Every day we
Yeah.
were on set, the lead up to production. It was one of the greatest privileges of my life to be surrounded by people that were so committed to telling these stories faithfully.
Yeah, I sort of described your character as the emotional release valve of the show. I feel
It,
mildly
yeah,
clever for coming up with that, but yeah.
I'm going to
But
use that.
you take it, you have it. It's not trademark, but I guess the question that comes off of that, you seem like a very calm and centered human being. Um, Not the man I would assume to play this role, actually. But so, what did you draw? Why cast you? Basically, I mean, I think it's. As an actor, I know the answer. You know, the answer is you can't be all over the place and play someone who's hot-headed. It needs to come from an actual bit of flint to be, and they need to be grounded to do it. Otherwise, it's not real. It's just somebody going off. But why did they cast you?
No, that is a very good question. And Lucy Bevan, the casting director in this project, I think that was she tapped into something really magnificent, because the casting process for this production, with any of these kinds of productions like Band of Brothers in the Pacific, the cast is so huge, and there's so many pieces that have to weave in together, and so many narrative threads that combine and overlap, and things move very quickly. And these actors do have to develop a kinship and a sense of camaraderie, because it's all about the ensemble in these shows. And they really made magic happen. And I know that sounds so horribly cliche, but the fact that from the first day that we all got together, we just all hit it off and felt it just everything felt so natural from day one. The people they brought together, the different personalities, um, and everybody just unanimously felt like, wow, this is really something special we get to be a part of. And so, I to get back to your question, I don't exactly know why, of all the different parts, they looked at me, because you're right on the money. Usually people describe me as being very level-headed, calm. I'm not quick to anger, but I think that that characteristic does live in me somewhere, and I'd credit my mom for that, actually, which is often the case in Italian American families anyway. The hot-headed mother, and my mom was definitely. My dad was very, very, very laid back. He's from California. He's a stereotypical California surfer guy, just very chill about everything. But my mom, she stands about 5'4", but her nickname was Big Jude, because she just had this bear energy, this bear mom energy. And so any sense of any access that I have to quick temper and things like
Mhm.
that, it's that I get from my mom. So it doesn't often poke its head out in it doesn't often present itself in my everyday life, but it's there somewhere. And I don't know,
Did they
they
see it in
must have
your
seen something.
what was your audition scene? Can you remember what your
Yeah, so oh yeah, so this is I was saying this to Leighton. when we were chatting the other day. So the two scenes that are back to back in episode 5, one is the immediately after we've landed and we're riding towards the debrief,
Mm-hmm.
and then we go into the debrief, the interrogation scene. So on the ride over, Boccuzzi has a little bit of a breakdown moment, I suppose you could call it, and he really voices his sense of despair about the fact that we're going up and down and up and down, and it's just hopeless. It feels hopeless. So that was the scene that I read for, which is the emotional peak of the episode, I think, at least when the all that tension, because there's this long, protracted, tense fight that's happening in the air and the planes are going down, and then it's just so still and quiet. And then all that tension of eventually erupts in that one little speech. So that I think was the key moment for that character,
Mm.
and it happens right towards the climax of the episode. So that was one of the scenes that I prepared. Um, the other scene that follows immediately afterwards actually wasn't originally written for Boccuzzi. Unfortunately, one of my cast members, his name's Francesco, he played the ball turret gunner. The interrogation scene where he's describing having seen the planes that went down and that he didn't see any chutes, that was originally written for his character, but tragically he had to take some time off because he was sick, so he wasn't able to come in to shoot. And that day I arrived, it was actually my first day on set, so I was expecting a very laid back day. I'm in the scene, but I'm in the background leaning against the wall, is how it was described, and like a lot of the guys, just thousand yard stare. um, I thought that's great. It's been a while since I've been on set. This will be a good way of just getting in the space, getting
That's
back in
right.
the headspace of being on set, but I
Yeah.
don't have to do anything. I can kind of ease my way in. And right before we got on the trucks to head over to location, they said, "All right, we've got a situation. Francesco is unable to make it. So, would you be willing to pick up these lines? You think you could handle that?" And of course, the immediate instinct is, yeah, I got it. Yeah, let's do it. But it was very nerve wracking. But I think that and I know this is, I'm sure, the experience that you can relate to on Band of Brothers, when you're around a solid ensemble of actors and good creative people. Um, even if you're really thrown in and just have to make it up as you're going along, their level of professionalism and their abilities, it's the rising tide lifting all ships.
Yeah.
I felt confident to step in and do it because the bar was set very high by the other performers on set, and I realized, okay, this is my time to step up and do this. And so it was a real baptism just to leap in head first. But I was glad that happened, because after that I felt like, all right, I've crossed the threshold. I'm in it now. And so the rest of the production I felt was
Yeah. It
it
must have been.
ran pretty smoothly.
It's a bit of a godsend, really, because, like you say, you must have been vaguely familiar with the scene because you did it in your audition piece. So it'd have been there,
Yeah.
but in the background. But then you wouldn't have had all of the energy wasting of nerves and stuff that we get before we have to do something. Early on, you were
Yeah.
just thrown right into it. Very little time to think, but you must have already had a base performance in your mind from your audition. But you did the work for it probably weeks or months earlier, maybe. Perhaps did you
Yeah,
think?
that's a good point. That's a very good point. I think that it would have, it's easy to agonize over these things for days. And, oh my God, I'm going to be heading on set tomorrow and I have
Mm,
to nail it. And so the fact that I wasn't expecting to do anything and then just thrown in
yeah,
a few minutes beforehand, I think might have been the best thing that could have happened, because I didn't have time to build up any expectation. So
yeah,
there wasn't anything to try to let go of. I just already was in there with no sense of expectation. And sometimes that's the way it goes, where even without any prep, just going in and responding as naturally as you can ends up yielding better work than if you have the luxury of months to pour over it.
yeah,
And that tends to be the way it works out with me. I I'm always working against this compulsion to prepare so much. And
Yeah.
sometimes the best gift is when I just don't have the luxury of doing that and just see what happens.
Yeah,
So
it's difficult. I still find it with auditions, that yeah, I have, you experience this kind of three audition thing where you have the one that you want to do, the one you actually did, and then the one you wish you'd done. Do you know what I mean? The
mhm.
three sort of performance when you do any audition or any filming, you always have something, an expectation of where you want to get to, and then you do the actual thing, and then you kind of go, oh, I wish I'd done this, I wish I'd done that. But
Yeah.
how do you feel about your performance? Was it easy to kind of let it go and kind of just move on from it? Were you nervous about watching yourself for the first time on such a big gig?
Yeah. Yes is the short answer, definitely. And I think further to what I was saying a second ago about not having time to prepare, I actually found it much easier to watch that second scene where I wasn't originally scripted to be in because I felt so relaxed in that scene that in a way I didn't, because I hadn't built up any expectation for, as you said,
Mm,
how this is meant to go, how I want this to go or come across.
mm,
I felt a great sense of ease watching that second scene.
mm,
However, the on the truck scene with the big outburst, I mean, of course, that on the flip side, I had built up as, oh God, okay, here we go. Here's this scene where we're driving around a truck, and all right, nothing else happens. It's all quiet, and then you just have to explode. And so that I had built up in my head for months because the
mm,
casting that was months out, that we all were and for some people over a
mm,
year out before we started filming. So
mm,
I was cast pretty far out, and I had a lot of time to worry about that scene. And it was similar to how you were describing the audition process, how it often goes, that I felt very calm about it until about 5 seconds before. And I realized I had this moment where I went, oh, I actually think I get it, what I actually want to do with this now. And I had this, oh shit, okay, should I completely change course or just kind of
mm.
see? So I had then immediately afterwards also thinking, is that how I really wanted to do it? Should I have done, should I have tried to go for some big emotional sobbing mess? And yeah, whenever it's the case that you're expected to go in cold into a big emotional scene and then it closes,
Mm,
opens, closes. It's very tricky to navigate that. And
mm,
it's not the first time I had been asked to do something like that, but I can honestly, it's not my forte to just turn on the emotional valve and enter a scene. So it felt very awkward for me. But we did a lot of takes, and they happened to pick the one they picked. So
yeah,
that's
good
how
stuff.
it worked out.
Good
Yeah, and
work.
that
Good
take
work.
made it into the trailer, so it can't be too
Yeah, exactly.
bad.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen how much time you spend on social media and how meme friendly you are, but I don't know if you've seen the Leonardo DiCaprio meme from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where he sees himself on the TV show and he's drinking a beer and he
Yeah,
clicks
yeah,
his
yeah.
fingers and points. That is exactly when the trailer dropped. I never in a million years thought that my character would make it in the trailer because I thought, humbly, I was working on this project for a long time, but that's mostly because the in any scene the crew travels together. So I'd be there a lot, but in terms of having real featured camera time was pretty limited. So it was a fairly small character, but uh, to have had that moment make it into the trailer, it was exactly that. I was watching it at home and pointing, going, "Hey, hey, hey, that's me!" So
Yeah,
I was ticked.
Yeah, I've the same things. I had, very little to do really in the overall show and the big scheme of things. But one of my sequences made it into the credits at the opening. With the motorbike with
Mhm.
Malarkey, and that was cool. So
It's
it's
nice.
good.
It's very nice.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
yes, I was thinking about this well, last night or this morning, one of the two. When you're in a show, a big show like this, a big ensemble show, and just like you said, a lot of the time you're just kind of hanging about.
Yeah.
Or you're sort of like in sort of a mid shot or back shot or the rest of it. But then you have these scenes that you know are coming and it's sort of in the back of your head. Like at one point I'm going to do, I don't know when it is. Like they might do it today. They might do it. It's a little bit like waiting to bat in baseball. You're sat
Hmm.
in the pen for ages and then you get out and you've basically got three strikes and you're done. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
Hmm.
That's it. If
that's a
you
really good
miss the ball
analogy.
three times, you're
That's a
done.
really good
Or if you
analogy.
twat it behind you and it's a foul, you're done. So like it's hard. You guys will understand what I'm talking about here. But it's I'm just trying to describe it for people who don't know. It's hard not to overdo it. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like suddenly it's my turn. Like you described before. Like, do I have this huge, good emotional sobbing breakdown? No, no, of course you don't. But the temptation is to just go, look how good I am. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's very difficult to remain relaxed and deliver just what you're supposed to do because you've been waiting for so long, clutching
Mm,
your little bat ready to come out.
Yeah.
mm.
I
That's a
think that's
great
a
analogy.
perfect way of
Yeah.
describing it. I mean, and as someone that grew up actually, to further this baseball analogy, as
Please
someone who
do.
grew up playing baseball, uh, your listeners probably have gathered by now that I'm from the United States. So I did, as a typical kid from the States, not 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 in the country exactly, but I didn't grow up. I'm not one of these kids who grew up in Brooklyn. Like I think a lot of people that aren't from the States, they watch a show like Band of Brothers or Masters of the Air, and they think that all Americans grow up in like the big city, like New York, or they're like cattle ranchers from Texas. I was just from a suburb near Seattle, but I grew up playing baseball, and it's the exact thing. If you go and you swing for the fences as hard as you can, that you end it works counterproductively because the ball actually goes way farther if you just swing it very relaxed, and
Mm,
it's that sense of tension in the body that limits the force that's generated. And so there's this it's that's just a perfect way of describing it, that if you
mm,
go up there and you've got this one shot, the pitch is coming in, and you
mm.
swing with everything you've got, it ends up usually foul ball or just goes straight into the
Yeah,
dirt. And then
absolutely.
you're like, wow, all
Yeah,
my might, and that's what happened. And
Yes.
yeah.
And I've ended up on my ass looking like a fool because I went at it way too hard. Yeah, I remember watching. I can't remember what I was watching a documentary on it. I think it was like the making of Gone with the Wind or something mad. And it was a really good director, someone like George Cukor, and he was directing somebody. And the piece of direction he gave her was, "Your face looks really hard. Try and relax your face." It sounds really rude when he says it, but it's a perfect piece of direction because it's like she's just holding on too tight. Do you know what I mean? Like, just relax. It's so
Yeah.
hard as an actor just to relax because you only have these little pockets of time, unless you're kind of number one on the call sheet, and then you just sort of, I don't know, you get
Yeah,
into
get
it,
into a
relax.
rhythm.
It's so hard, and it's like I wanted to sort of go back as well and talk about the casting. We're not really touched on casting at all, and you mentioned what a great job the casting have done. Speaking to Meg Lieberman, who cast Band of Brothers, like they're in the same boat, the casting directors as well. Like they want an opportunity to be able to put the best guys together, and they so rarely get that opportunity. They might be casting some crappy commercial where they've got, he has to have all these like, has to punch out points. It has to be this guy, or they're not really looking for the best actors in something. They're looking for somebody in some slightly cheesy show, and but when they get an opportunity like Masters of the Air, they can really, really go for it. Um, and they put together them, and they did it on the Pacific, and they did it with you guys. They just find the
Yeah,
best actors,
yeah.
and it must be fantastic for them. But they put so much work into it.
mhm.
Did you do have a lot of recalls? Did you have a lot of recalls? And did you only read for that part, or did you read for others through the process?
Yeah, so I think this was the case for a lot of guys. So quick history about me. Around the time that Masters started casting, the reason why I moved out to London, originally I'm from Seattle, as I mentioned. I lived in Los Angeles for about 5 years before I moved to London. And I never did an undergraduate program after I left the house when I was young. I just sort of traveled and stitch together a rougher education, I guess. Um, and when I was in Los Angeles and feeling a little bit disillusioned with how life was going there, I just really didn't feel like it was the place that I wanted to stay for the long haul. So I started thinking about other choices, and I just had the idea of going back to school, and so I applied for a 2-year master's program at drama school in London. And so I came out here and I went to a school called Lambda,
Mhm.
which, actors will all know that one.
Yeah.
Non-actors maybe have never heard of it, but a fairly prestigious drama school out here in London. And I did 2 years there, and I had just turned 30 when I left LA. So it felt, on the one hand, kind of like a risk stepping away, taking a lateral move and stepping out of, the career mode for a couple years. Felt like a little bit of a risk, but in hindsight, I'm really glad I did. And I just have always really loved London, and having the opportunity to stay. I mean, booking Masters of the Air, getting cast in that was a huge part of me being able to stay for up until now. Um, so I had been in school, and then I immediately got involved with Masters of the Air almost the day after I graduated was the first day of shooting. I mean, it was really
Wow.
that back to back. But so I have a tendency to go off on long parenthetical thoughts. But to answer your question, I will circle back to it. Um, for a lot of us, we read for multiple parts, and I originally was reading for the part of Ken Lemons. So I had done, as is typical, and because it was, I think, during lockdown when they were casting that part. So I had done a self-tape audition for it. I think I did two self-tape auditions for it. So they wanted to see one chunk of scenes, then another chunk of scenes. And then I went in for a recall, and of course that had to be done on Zoom. So few more scenes, and then the casting process, because they were looking at all the key characters, that took several months. So it was a long time waiting, and they had to get everyone, all the executives from Apple, the directors, everyone had to get together, and it was a long process. So I didn't hear back about that, and I was still in school at the time, so I was luckily focused on other things, but I didn't hear back about that for about 2 or 3 months. And when I got the word that they were going, we were going the other way with that, I thought, well, that's that's unfortunate, but it was a dream, because I grew up. I had the box set of Band of Brothers when I was a kid. I watched that show religiously. It's strange to think about it now, but as a 12-year-old, I think when that show came out, um, strange to look back and think, wow, even as a 12-year-old, that show really tapped into something so unique that I was hooked on it. I watched that show back to back so many times. And so even having the opportunity to be in the arena for the next
Mm.
installment of the franchise was great. But fortunately, because Lucy Bevan had thought that even though that role didn't go my way, that I think being American, being in London, and I don't know, being able to capture a character of that era, she thought that she would have to find something else. And so a few months later, when they were looking at Block Two, which was Rosenthal's crew, she looked at the list of characters that they had to cast, and that's where they chucked me back into the mix with Boccuzzi. And that was another round of Zoom recalls, reading a few more scenes, a few scenes that were from earlier episodes, and just to get the sense of, can you portray that sense of camaraderie? You know, there's the high intensity battlefield scenes, more emotionally tense, but also they need to show these guys when they're all just back at base, and they're
Mm.
just guys, young guys hanging out. So the contrast of those two scenes they had to see. And after that round, it was a little bit quicker. I heard within the next week or two, and I was at school, and obviously
What
shouted
to
from the
say?
rooftops.
Yeah, yeah.
Would
That's
you
great.
do that thing where you're just like, sorry guys, I've got to go off and shoot the new Spielberg show. You know what that's like. Oh no, you don't, do you? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was really funny. All a little memory from my last months at Lambda. We were doing, I won't say what it was because I don't want to badmouth any playwright, but we were doing a show, and I just absolutely hated it. I just was so not invested in doing the show. I was really There was just no part of it that I could get to sink my teeth into and really feel like, yep, I'm on fire for this project. I'm loving the play and the production and the character. Everything just felt off. And so knowing that I was going to be leaving, and then the after the last performance of that show, our final end of year performance, I'd be transitioning into something that I did feel much more creatively turned on by, was very helpful. And I remember we did a couple days of boot camp. Um, and so I went to the boot camp and they got us all kitted up with all the equipment and the full outfits. And I took some pictures in the costume and I just felt so cool. And when I went back after doing the boot camp, I had to go straight into the final technical rehearsal for the show. And I walked in and just thought I was the biggest stud in the world because I walk into the theater and everyone's like, hey, and I'm like, all right, guys, come on, come on. It's all right. I'm just one of you, right? And I start showing off this photo, like, yeah, you see that? That's me in a bomber outfit. What? Yes. So it did get to my head a little bit, but I tried to play it cool, but it's tough when you just left a set like the one that we were
Yeah.
shooting on for Masters of the Air, and around Dale Dye and Laird McIntosh, the our advisors, and how cool they just made us all feel doing this training and getting physically and psychologically geared up to do this production. So I was on high. So despite the fact I was heading into a production that I felt really neutral about, I mean, that's putting it generously. I just felt so alive knowing like I had just come. So
Mm.
nothing could disturb me at that point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was happy as a clam to even do
That's
this
how that's
play
how
that I
Matt feels every day, isn't it, Matt?
Yeah, that's how I feel every
Just,
day. I feel happy as a
he just
clam.
turns up in his
I just
aviators, and that's it. Like everyone else
one
is
time I'm
dead,
not wearing my aviators. Yeah, yeah. I don't
and a
mean
headband.
yeah, my headband. Don't need to draw focus. I'm sorry, I've got this ridiculous blanket on. We recorded we recorded an intro before where I mentioned how freezing it is in this house. I am shivering and shaking, but hanging on your every word. We had Adam Long on yesterday, I believe, and he claimed he'd quite like to have done a proper boot camp. I'm not saying yours wasn't a proper boot camp, but one of those ones where Dale Dye puts you in a forest for 2 weeks and whips you and that kind of stuff. Would you have been down for doing something like that?
Because you
Or were
must
you
have
happy with the
seen it
one
in
you
the
did?
DVD. It was in the DVD extras, the boot camp video made
yeah,
by Ron. Yeah.
Yeah.
most definitely. I mean, it's funny, speaking of DVDs, that was one of the things, growing up. Um, I'm old enough that I still remember watching stuff on VHS. That's sort of the around the age range that I'm in. But by the time Band of Brothers came out, it was on a DVD box set. But all the watching DVDs, you always had those extras and the featurettes and things like that. And I loved these classic war movies, and same thing with Black Hawk Down, Band of Brothers, all these movies. You see the extra features. You've got these groups of actors that are being put through like Delta Force training or
Mm.
Army Ranger training or whatever. And yeah, absolutely. I would be 100% down for that. And yeah, ours was pretty quick because of course it's limited the amount of practical training we can do for flight training, and we were able to do some firearms training. Of course, they were we were firing blanks, but the machine guns that were firing in the show were kitted with blanks, and so we did some fun stuff, but it wasn't as intense as some of the boot camps you hear about, like from some of these other productions. But I would be and would still be well on board to do something like that.
Sorry, I apologize. There's a fella mowing his lawn because it's America and you have to mow your lawn on a Sunday morning. So I'm trying to keep the buzzing down and I was trying to unmute myself as well.
That's somewhere in the Constitution. You have to have
It is
freshly cut grass on
Yeah.
a Sunday.
exactly the Third Amendment. Oh, darn it. I forgot what I was going to ask you now. Oh, I tell you what, yeah, it's
Right.
to do with boot camp and it's to do with Dale Dye. So on our boot camp, I've told the story 100 times, but I'll get to the point of the matter was that after the 2 weeks we were there, uh, we all we had a picture taken on base, like we're Easy Company now, and as we're getting the picture taken, this voice, Dale Dye's at the front of the picture, like these are my boys. This voice from the back starts going, now goddamn something or other, and it's somebody doing an impersonation of Dale Dye. Uh, and I come from a military family. My father's a colonel. He was in the parachute regiment. My initial reaction was just to go sheep white and think he's going to make us do this whole boot camp again. Shut up, shut up. But he actually found it really, really funny. So I'm wondering, there's always somebody who does a perfect impersonation of Dale Dye. Who was it on your particular crew?
So you actually met Josh Bolt already, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. We've
Does
had
he?
So Josh does many impressions, but him and Ian Dunnett Jr., um, who is also in Rosie's crew, the two of them were known for doing many impressions, and Dale Dye was certainly among them. I don't remember because I think I had missed the day of training, uh, where I think the first day where the crew met Dale. I don't think I was there for that. But all I remember is there was this one thing he had said that they kept bringing up over and over and over again. And I don't remember what the context of it was, but they just kept saying, now, when you get up there, and that was it. But they just always would say that in their Dale Dye voice. And um, it was, again, I think he had to be very stern with us in the beginning, so we know, like, you need to cut the shit and take this
yeah.
seriously.
Yeah.
There's a sense of responsibility here, but after some time, he would warm up a bit, and you get to see that he is a very kind and caring person, but he does not f around in the beginning for sure.
No.
I mean, and that's what
No.
we would want. That we didn't want we wanted to take the whole project seriously, so we were game.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one the one on band. He was. I mean, everyone used to do impersonations of it, but Richard Spate Jr. used to do it as well. He
Rick
was really
Gomez.
Gomez. Well, Gomez was brilliant as well, but
Yeah, he was
I
brilliant.
think Gomez and Cudlitz used to do one because I think Dale Dye made up an organ in the body that you punched and it would kill people. And I think it was around about here at the back of your head, and it was called a thromboid. Now, it may exist. I don't know. Medical people out there could tell me, but I don't think it does. And he would be like, oh, you get him over, you punch him in the thromboid. And the two of them used to go on about this thromboid. It was so funny.
Now, if you ball up your fist like this and apply
Oh,
5 pounds of pressure to the thromboid, you'll
Yes,
see something.
exactly. To the thromboid. Kill, kill, kill.
yeah.
Uh,
That's from
so,
an army manual in 1945
Yeah,
for sure.
exactly.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Karate
Neil, I
chop.
don't mean to pick you up on this one. I'm not seeing the word thromboid anywhere. So I got a slightly facetious question because we've had you for almost an hour, so I'm slightly winding up now. It's not facetious, but given what you know, given the training that you went through, given the guy that you portrayed, and being in the cockpit and all the rest of it, and realizing the chaos and terror of just being helpless in a tin can with flak coming at you. If you had a choice, you personally had a choice between infantry, air force, or a submarine, which would it be?
Definitely not submarine. That I
Yeah,
can rule
it's the
out.
last. Yeah,
I I I I think that's the nightmare scenario for me. I'm not particularly claustrophobic, but there's nothing about that appeals to me.
Yeah.
Um, I just couldn't do it. Uh, I mean, amazing that there are men and women that get in that sub and serve
Yeah.
and do this. And no disrespect to them, but I guess I don't know. I'm not psychologically strong enough to do that job. I'll happily say that. What were the other choices?
Infantry, but I'm talking like frontline infantry.
Mhm.
Yeah, like just
Frontline
proper in the
infantry.
trenches. See, I
Mm.
always think that's the one I couldn't do. I couldn't do a sub either, but I couldn't. I think I'd be all right. I would be all right, like a commando capacity, just like a couple of days, and then I have to go home.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, back in
I
time for tea
couldn't.
and
Yeah,
medals. Yeah.
I couldn't sit in a trench for weeks after weeks getting shelled. I would go nuts.
Yeah.
So I think I'd have to go. I'd have to be in the Air Force. I'd have to at least at the end of the day. I don't know. I guess you go home. I don't know.
Well, if we're speaking specifically about this era of warfare in during the Second World War, I think the I understand what you mean, the terror and the psychological stamina it takes to be on the front lines for weeks on end. It's an interesting question, and one that I feel Masters of the Air does examine to an extent, how it stretches you in a very different way psychologically. If you're going to 100%, like the worst possible combat you could be in, and then a few hours later, if you make it, you're in a nice air conditioned room with a bar and
Mm.
hot showers and food. So the book Masters of the Air talks about this quite a lot. What this would do to people, ping ponging back and forth between waking up 6 a.m. You're going up. There's a very low likelihood you're going to survive, but if you do, then you're back at base or you're in London and you're just drinking with the guys and some of your friends are not there. So that reality of ping ponging back and forth between those two extremes of being in a secure army base far from the conflict zone and going back and forth versus these longer stretches where you'll be cycled in and out for you'll have a run on the front line and then you get cycled out and you get cycled back in. I think, I mean, it's a really tough question. I think that the it's like here's how I would describe it. It's like, the arrogant thing that people say, I could never get in a self-driven car because
Mm.
even though statistically speaking they're way safer, I would just need to be in control because I'd feel safer knowing I'm in
Mm.
control. I think that's where my mind goes to when I think about the difference between being in a plane where you really have you're giving over control of someone else is piloting it. There's so many variables that are completely out of your control versus the 2% of agency you feel to have your feet on the ground maybe is the thing that would tip me in that direction to say maybe because I'd have more of a sense of autonomy of movements. That I mean, it's a tough role no matter what. But I think being on the ground would be my preference. Um, but it's a tough job.
What would you do, Matt? Which one would you choose?
Yeah, definitely. I think
Yeah.
like massive amount of adrenaline. I don't know how to be terrified, whatever. But I think given the choice, I would be in the air definitely. It's the longevity of being on the front line. I think I would lose my mind quite quickly.
Yeah.
What about yourself?
I think I would, yeah, submarine or front line. Different, yeah, because the consistency, if you're in a submarine and you're all in this, very small environment, I think I could, and there'd be a high sort of sense of stress because obviously you're underwater, you don't know what's happening. But I think I could deal with that consistent stress and then just focus on the job I do would be I could just get very into it, and that would be my sort of safety thing to try and click into that. I think that would be better for me. I think going like to 100% and then having time off and then having to build up and 100% time off, 100%, and coming back home all the time and then away, home, away. I think that would that would be tougher for me. I think I don't think I'll be able to do that for very long. I think it would send me crazy. Yeah,
You're nice and tall though. You bang your head a lot in a submarine.
yeah, I would. Yeah,
Comic relief. You'd be the comic relief. Whack your head all the time. Um, all right, so we've had you for almost an hour, Riley. Actually, I've got two questions though. The first one is, so in 20 years' time, when you're on a podcast talking to whoever's doing the sixth installment of Masters of the Band of Brothers, Masters of the Air, what's the one scene or the one moment from Masters of the Air that's just going to take you back? Like, I'm back on set, you know, when I think about it or whatever. The one vivid moment that you'll never forget.
There's a scene that we shot, and it took us a long time to shoot it because it was a very there was a lot of moving parts. It's very complicated. The How it ended up in the show, it's very quick. So it's probably about 30 seconds or less. I think it's in episode 7. Um, but Rosenthal's crew is at base. We've been cycled out, so we're standing down, and there's a mission that goes up, and one of the planes comes back and it's on fire. So the whole base just comes to life, and the ambulances are on the way, the engineers are on the way, and everybody's converging at this ship, at the plane to help out getting guys out. And the in the show, it ends up being about a 30-second sequence. It's quite quick, but because it was this big wide shot and there's so many different moving parts, we had to shoot it again and again and again. And one thing that got cut out, Rosenthal's crew trying to distract themselves of this feeling of any moment now our guys might come back. They're meant to be playing volleyball, and so we're all playing volleyball, but we just started it starts dumping rain on us. We're out there shooting the scene, and the rain starts pouring, so all of us in our military uniforms are like shivering playing volleyball. And when the cameras go up and the action's called, we're meant to have the final shot of the game. We see the plane lands, and then we all are like, oh, we just take off running across this field. And then we approach the plane, and we see these guys who are just totally mangled being pulled off the plane. We're just watching in horror, and the thing's on fire. And it's such an intense, epic scene. And we did that dozens of times. We're playing volleyball in the rain, and then we sprint across this field, and then this. I mean, again, speaking of the authenticity and the commitment to really doing this for real, they were committed to making everything as real as possible. So they had a bomber plane coming down, taxiing down on fire. I mean, just it's was a terrifying spectacle. This big plane taxiing down the runway, and there's a flame effect. The engines are on fire. It's billowing smoke. So we're running towards that, and it felt, I mean, like all my dreams of being in an action movie coming to life in that moment, because we're just heroically sprinting down this field towards this burning plane. And even though you can hardly even see us in that scene in the actual episode, you can maybe kind of point to us, oh, there, we're over there. But the filming of that, I'll never forget what that was like. Just
yeah,
how, and again, how the scope of this project, because they have hundreds of people on this base,
yeah,
hundreds of people, all um, being choreographed for this one big shot. And most of us aren't really making it into the shot, so to speak, but we are a part of it. But even though that wasn't like a big featured moment for us, it was so unreal to be a part of that sequence. I
we
mean, it was, I will remember that for the rest of my life for sure.
we had a few of those in Band because it was obviously, you know, you're not in an airplane in a tight sort of environment that's kind of all locked down. We had quite a few of those sequences, didn't we, Matt?
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Where because when Riley was describing that, I was thinking of episode 5. You know, when he does the bayonet charge,
Yeah.
but then after that, when the bombers come in and drop the bombs, and we have this kind of firefight, and you could just see the explosions going off from about a mile away. And And similar to what you're saying, right? Like for as far as the eye could see, there were extras in, everyone was there. So I was looking this way and there was nothing to tell me that I wasn't there. There was nothing,
Yeah.
there was no sort of, light things standing or modern cars or anything in my field of vision. It was just this thing for as
Yeah.
far as I could see. I'll never forget that. And these huge explosions and the ground was shaking and shaking and shaking. It was absolutely phenomenal. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
very cool. Oh, thanks for telling us that, Riley. So,
Yeah, great one, Riley. Took me right back.
last question. So we subhead our podcast the Nearly Men, and I always ask this of all my prey. Is there something you nearly could have been? It can be a part that you nearly got, or I nearly ended up being a violinist in the Lincoln Philharmonic Orchestra or something.
That is a good question. Hmm. Well, so yeah, in keeping with this show, I think when I was young, I made more of a real effort to pursue acting as a profession when I was about 21. But there's being so fascinated with growing up watching these kinds of movies, there was a part of me, I don't know how seriously I considered it, but I considered, instead of going to school or training, doing actor training, potentially enlisting in the military. It was maybe more of a flight of fancy, like because I felt lost and I was thinking, I'm not sure what to do at this juncture of my life. So I did think about that at one point. So to say nearly, I don't really know. I mean, I think I'd be lying if I said it was like something I was really seriously considering. But I did always, I've always had mad respect, absolute respect for people in the armed services, and so I considered it. The wankier actor answer to that question is the first job I ever booked on a TV show was this Poor Man's Walking Dead on the Sci-Fi Network in the States. And I booked a big part on that show and then was fired 5 days before filming. So very brutal first experience into acting. So that was my, not to say that I don't imagine my career would necessarily look way differently, but I had booked for me at the time being, I don't know, probably 22, 23, living in Seattle. So the idea of booking a big part on a TV show, even a fairly small TV show, was such a big deal. And I had told everybody I know, I'm gonna be this badass motorcycle riding apocalypse surviving guy in this zombie show, and then I got fired 5 days before because I was very young. I looked very young, and the character was meant to be an absolute badass. And I think just did a good job in the audition. I can honestly say that the casting director helped me do a good audition, and they cast me in that part. But I think when the production was gearing up to start, they started getting cold feet and thinking, oh my God, do we really think this kid is the right fit for this guy he's meant to be like an absolute stud, like, badass machete wielding, zombie killer. And I was game. I really was amped to do it, but they ended up 5 days before filming. I had even gotten my motorcycle license to do this show. I paid for it myself. I went into a crap town near Seattle. I drove down there at like 6 in the morning for a week straight to learn how to ride a motorcycle on my dime. And I failed the test the first time, retook it the second time, and I got my motorcycle license, which I've never used. Like, I learned how to ride a motorcycle for that TV show because I told them I could. They're like, can you ride a motorcycle? Yeah, sure. And as soon as they cast me, I went, oh my God, I have to learn to ride a motorcycle. So I took this course, and then the day that I passed my test, not joking, the day I passed my test, my agent called me and said, I've got some news. You might want to sit down. This is going to be a tough one. And I was thinking, oh God, what has happened? they said, we're really sorry, but since you haven't technically signed a contract yet, you're out. They're going to go another way.
Oh, that's tough.
So my I don't know. It's kind
Oh
of
my
a
goodness.
That's
just
a tough
the
lesson. That's a good lesson to learn early. Like you never, we were talking about this yesterday. You have zero expectations and never believe. Like for me, I don't have the job until I'm at unit base, and I'm about to
yeah.
get called. That's when I believe it. Up until then, anything can go wrong, and it has done. But you do have I would suggest you buy a motorcycle and get riding because there's lots of good roads around London, and I think you're going to love it. Yeah, go down to the bike
Yeah,
shop on the way. Yeah,
I'm definitely it's definitely something I'm considering.
yeah.
I have thought about it because I know how it's been now 10 years since I rode a motorcycle, but it's like riding a bike,
It is
as they
exactly
say.
like riding a bike.
Like a motorized bike. I like the fact that we finally found his anger as well. Did you see that? That's it. There
Yeah.
it is. There
Oh
it
yeah.
is.
It's
Yeah.
that is something. So a lot of colleagues, a nickname I often get in the workplace is Ranting Riley because that's something that it's there are everyone's got their trigger points, and sometimes I will get touched by
Yeah.
something and it will send me off.
Yeah. I've
And
got quite a
what
few.
I refer to it as a passionate rant. Some people are like, "Why are you so angry?" And I'm like, "It's not anger. I'm just very. This is important."
Yeah. Get that as
Fantastic.
well.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
thanks so much for coming on, Riley. Thank you for your time. It's been great. Real good chat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks so
no,
much,
it's been
Riley.
absolute pleasure. I've loved it, and so nice to meet you both. And
You
I'll
too.
say, before we sign off, it. You asked me what it would be like if the shoe was on the other foot. I mean, but it is very much it's surreal being here with you two because so I watched that show when it premiered when I was young, and then I obsessed over it and I bought the DVD. So I've watched them all. I've watched you both in this show many times. And I remember probably in 2016, Tom Hanks was interviewed on Jonathan Ross, I think, and they started talking about Band of Brothers and how maybe it's because it wasn't anything to do with the Pacific. I think they were just talking about it because it was such a big deal. And he was describing what it was like casting that show. And he did this impression of all these actors playing American parts were recent drama school graduates from London, and how they have this cast, which is hundreds of American guys, and they're all being played by British actors. And they kind of made light of that. And I thought, man, I just was born at the slightly at the wrong time because if I was born slightly earlier and I'd been going to drama school, maybe that could have been me. And I had no idea that Masters of the Air was in production. Like I didn't have my ear to the ground. I didn't know that it existed. I found out that it was being produced when I got the offer to audition for it. So, and it happened while I was at drama school in London. So it was just really a surreal moment, like the whole thing coming full circle. Because when people ask me, which I'm sure you've been asked many times in your career, what's like the dream role for you? What
Mm.
inspired you to become an actor? And all those really banal questions that you just figure out however you want to answer them. But one of the things that I always think of is it's shows like Band of Brothers that I would see and go, oh, to be a part of that kind of ensemble driven show that's epic and dramatic and funny. And that was a big part of why I want to be an actor. It's a big part of like the kind of work that I'm interested in doing. So, and then seeing that interview and thinking, I missed the boat on that kind of thing because they're never going to do a show like that ever again. And to see, it said the email subject was self-tape request, Project Whirlwind. And I thought, what the F is Whirlwind? And then it said like, Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks, Gary Goatsman, like, oh, I'm like, what the hell? What is this? The follow on to the much celebrated Band of Brothers. And I mean, again, just the whole 20-year coming full circle moment. So it's been it's been a pleasure to be a part of it, and I'm so jazzed to even been asked to be here. So pleasure is absolutely all mine.
Fantastic. Also, Project Whirlwind doesn't sound like a Tory thing, like Project like potholes in the street or something. We're launching
Yeah,
Project Whirlwind.
Something below the radar. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
all these
exactly.
code names.
That's great.
Uh,
Brilliant.
World at War episode title. Oh, it was a World at War episode title, apparently, Project Whirlwind. Our Leighton's just told us there. Well, anyway, thank you so much, Riley. If you thank you so much for coming on. If you hop off, I'm just going to do a ending bit of the podcast, but it's been a pleasure to have you on, sir.
Likewise, thank you so much. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day and good luck with that cold flat that you're in.
Freezing, mate. Cheers,
It's
buddy.
lovely to meet you, Riley.
Right.
I wish you
See ya.
well. See you again soon.
You
Cheers,
as
buddy.
well.
Wow.
Very, very smart and erudite young man.
He really is, isn't he?
Yeah.
What a great story. He tells a great story, and
Yeah. That was
follows his mind, and
I loved it. He's just this super mellow guy, and I'm thinking, but he played such like a firecracker in the show.
yeah.
And they get him talking about that. He's like,
Yeah, you do see it
on my own dime. I was like, oh, there he is. There's the character.
Yeah, fantastic.
Very, very good.
Oh,
all right. So
great.
we better sign off and say goodbye to everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks to all our
Haven't you got to do a
patrons.
plug or something?
I did it at the beginning.
Oh, what was that?
Oh, did you actually want to carry on?
So I did find it.
Oh, yes.
So it's they have a website, and it's called currahetonormandy.com. All one word, currahetonormandy.com. And it tells you all about what they're doing, making a documentary. They're at Toccoa now. I think they landed yesterday. Some of the guys are arriving there today. They're doing jump school for a week. They're doing 5 jumps. And then the aim is to jump Normandy around the 6th. We're going to be there for like a week or 10 days or so anyway. And it's to raise money for veterans charities. So currahetonormandy.com, all one word. You can donate there, I think that would be a worthy thing, a worthy cause as well. So to chart the progress of half a dozen 50-year-old, slightly overweight and
balding
mentally ill men jump out of aeroplanes more than once, and with the hope of, I've just got this vision of it being a cloudy, rainy day in Normandy, and they just go, look, just do it anyway, and doing it, and then they're having to pull people out of the ocean, out of the English Channel, or from the top of a school building somewhere,
Yeah, exactly. Hooked onto the steeple at San Meriglise.
Yeah, that's right.
If you want to hear a 50-year-old man scream solidly for 3 minutes.
Fantastic.
Well, listen, guys, thanks for listening, and we'll catch up with you soon. We've done a couple of these back-to-backs. We may not record next week, but you won't notice the difference. Thanks very much, and see you again. Bye.
Yep. See you guys soon. Ciao.